Going to be presenting some GSM data for some Wyoming trumpeter swans and kind of the areas we're using in winter. So a little bit more GYE trumpeter swans for you. Just wanted to thank Bill and Emerald for all their guidance and help this project. The three of us are really happy that all of you all traveled here so we could have our own conference in Jackson. All righty. So just brief reminder of the natural history lesson we're all getting on the GYE trumpeter swans. The remnant core population did not in the tri-state area, Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, didn't have much of a legacy of long distance migration. As that population grew, most of those birds were wintering in Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge and Harriman State Park, which came with its own risks of winter concentrations. We heard about the ice event in 1989 that was likely the cause for the death of 100 birds there at Harriman. And also this area is concentrating winter members of populations from both the Canadian and the GYE populations. And in the 90s, there was some summer and winter translocations from Harriman and Red Rock Lakes to Seed City and other areas of Wyoming, trying to expand kind of their range into this, the expansion area and of the GYE, and to expand winter range. So just specifically talking about this Green River population, which kind of occupies this area along the Green River. This is an important population for those working on the restoration of Wyoming trumpeter swans. There's captive breeding releases going on in the mid 90s into the early 2000s. In that mid 90s period, there was 45 captive bred cygnets released in that area. Also, some wild translocations in the summer and winter. And so while that reintroduction program was deemed successful and ended in 2000, I believe, there have been more recent concerns about the Green River population trends and their winter range concentrations. And also we had questions about the seasonal movement of the Wyoming population of trumpeter swans. So we collared at Wyoming Wetland Society, collared 11 Wyoming swans during the summers of 2020 and 2021. We did, I know Bill put on about 4 collars the summer before in 2019, and there was some issues with those batteries, and Ornatella kind of updated those collars, and we're working really pretty well since. Those Ornatella collars, kind of some of the ones you've been seeing on other presentations right here. They're 85 grams, made in Lithuania by Ornatella, the Ornatrack, and 55 GSM transmitters. So again, we're getting data through cell phone towers. So especially in rural parts of Wyoming, like Andrew was saying, might not get that data for months at a time, but then hopefully it all uploads. And the methods just for capturing is during summer molt, chasing them down in a couple kayaks. Bill's a pro here. Just tucking that trumpeter in the hull of his boat there. And again, those collars are solar powered. We were selecting typically for birds without cygnets, kind of whatever birds were most accessible. So in some areas we were capturing kind of non-breeders that were in larger flocks on Fontenelle Reservoir, and in other situations we're catching pairs that did not have cygnets. And if we caught a pair, we banned both, but only put collars on one. So this is the location of those 11 summer captured trumpeter swans. Here's the state of Wyoming. So we're in kind of the central western part of the state. Jackson is just kind of like up here for a little reference. So again, we've got like 4 birds on Fontenelle Reservoir. Those are non-breeding flocks there. We have one on Seedskiddy, a couple around Farson and Eden. And then these 2 birds are in that central flyway. That's on the Wind River Reservation. And then we've got a couple birds on the Upper Green River. So this bird on the Wind River Reservation, it wintered on the Wind River Reservation on in the slackwater of Bull Lake and Dinwiddie Lakes, as well as the Wind River. So that bird is kind of unique. It's the only one of our birds that did not winter on Sietskiidee National Wildlife Refuge. These two birds stopped transmitting data before they really got into their wintering grounds in November and December, but they did visit Sietskiidee before returning to their summer range in November and December. And then after that, we don't know what they did. Now that leaves 9 other birds, or I'm sorry, 8 other birds that all wintered on Sietskiidee of the 11 that we captured during the summer. And Sietskiidee is highlighted in green right down here. Oh. And then also one of the birds that Andrea mentioned on Bear Lake also in Idaho also came over to Sietskiidee for winter. So just I'm gonna add in that bird for our data. So Sietskiidee National Wildlife Refuge is this area in green, and it's along the Green River, and it's all slack water from the Fontenelle Reservoir. And there's 35 river miles within the refuge. In the winter, swans are kind of picking this area because there's slow winter flows. It's not very steep gradient on the river. And it's ice-free thanks to river flow management from the Bureau of Reclamation. They aim in partnership with the managers at Sietskiidee National Wildlife Refuge for 800 to 1,000 cubic feet per second coming out of the reservoir during the winter. And the last couple of years, that number has been low in the end of the summer and the fall. And because they don't want to have, mostly the Bureau of Reclamation is concerned about, if that flow slows down and they have freezing and then the water comes back up, you can have ice dams and flooding. So they try to keep 800 to 1,000 cubic feet per second coming out of there during the winter, which they have maintained. Last couple of years, it's been around 800 to 900 cubic feet per second. Swans are also like in the area because there's aquatic submerged vegetation. They're mostly taking the sago, Pelodia, and chara that are found in the Green River there. And there's also limited vehicle access, which I'll talk a little bit more later. But the refuge managers do close some vehicle access along the river there during the winter for waterfowl, just so that they're less disturbed. There are fishermen in the area. The Green River is a really world-class trout fishery. So there are fishermen, fewer in the winter, obviously. And then also people just visiting the refuge and walking around. So this Sietskiidee National Wildlife Refuge, we already know, winters most of the Green River population. And our data is kind of confirming that. And also a lot of other birds in Wyoming are using this area. They've recorded individuals that have been banded in Alaska, Canada, Montana, and other areas. Also wintering in Sietskiidee. Birds that have been released on Sietskiidee have also shown up north of here, breeding or trying to breed closer to Togadee Pass. There have been winter surveys looking at Rocky Mountain populations. The most recent one's published by David Olson. So kind of just a rough range of birds wintering there, around 50 birds in the early 2000s. Those numbers peaked just under 300 in 2014. It seems to have stabilized a little under that, kind of around the 150 birds roughly, up to 200 birds since then. And those are all winter aerial surveys. So this is a little bit more of our data from those 9 birds that wintered on Sietskiidee that we outfitted with collars. These are 5 of those birds, including that bird from Idaho, and kind of their locations that we recorded while they're on their wintering grounds from November to March in 2020 to 2021. I just wanted to note how the points are a lot more spread out here, closer to the refuge headquarters, where they have a lot more managed wetlands. As they go farther south, below Highway 28, those birds tend to really stick more on the river corridor. And they're also going up to Fontenelle for staging, and sometimes there's open water here where the reservoir flows out. This is the following winter. So this is for different birds. We didn't have any birds that have yet transmitted data for 2 consecutive winters. We probably will this winter because we have a few birds that are showing on this slide that are still in their summer grounds and will hopefully be transmitting this winter. Again, showing this wider distribution where there's more widespread wetlands along the river and back into the river corridor down here. Also, just looking at these two, a little bit more widespread in winter 2020 to 2021, and a bit more concentrated the following winter. Just showing some heat maps for those same data. So again, this is that first winter, 2020 and 2021. Really concentrated kind of on the upper end of the National Wildlife Refuge and a bit more, a little bit south of the headquarters. And these concentrations, about 3.5 river miles here and 3 river miles right there. Again, the following winter, this is last winter, showing a bit more concentrated in the central part of the refuge, and that's about 5 river miles of concentration there. And this is both years combined, just showing all of our data points on their winter grounds. Again, 3.5 miles and 5 miles. This whole area is 13 river miles. I want to note there's kind of an open space that birds were using this, but less concentrations, they're spending less time there. So now I want to talk about the road access on Fontenelle. So here's just the National Wildlife Refuge map. Here's the river headquarters. This area around the headquarters you cannot hunt, as well as this area. Most of the hunting goes on the eastern side of the river. And it's kind of tricky to see, but there's some roads that are closed to access. So if you can see this red dotted line along here, this whole area this road is closed from November 15th to March 15th. So hunters can't park right there. They can walk in, however, so there's no car access right there. There is car access right here on, I guess, the southern, but really like the western side of the river. This is open all winter. And then this part of the road, if it's snowy, it's open, but it's pretty hard to access. So could be people walking through, but not driving right along the river. So I just want to compare kind of the data we're seeing that road access, because there's some similarities here. So if you notice where there's really less activity is this area where the road is open all winter. You can see that comparison. And then where there's a lot of activity both years, where that road is closed. Again, hunters and fishermen can still walk in, but you cannot drive right next to the river. Here, this road's really close to the river where it's open. And again, this road is technically open, but hard to access. And we're kind of seeing a lot of use in that area as well. So pretty interesting management decisions there. So just some kind of potential reasons for distribution. Pretty compact area that they're using over those 2 winters, roughly just 13 miles of concentrated use by those swans. A small sample size, just 9 different birds that we had collared, but if you're assuming there could be up to 200 birds, if they're all using the same area, that's pretty concentrated area for those birds. And again, I just showed that overlap of open roads, closed roads, and increase in swan concentrations. And also we saw the more, maybe potentially, there's more space for birds where they were more dispersed away from the river corridor. And again, this area is typically ice-free in the winter because of the higher flows that they're letting out of the reservoir. If I go back, you can see Highway 28 is right here, and that's kind of what they say is the limit. If it's really, really cold for several days, the river could ice up to Highway 28, but this area should all be open. Future concerns for this wintering population, with the continued drought conditions in the west, Definitely concerned about continued flow from the Fontenelle Reservoir. So far, Bureau of Reclamation has been doing a great job with that, but definitely a concern. With maybe, up to 200 birds wintering on 13 river miles, there's potential, especially during ice up periods, for food availability and limited resources there. Obviously something important for them to build endogenous reserves and kind of that spring fat reserve that they need for breeding. As the water drops, if there's lower flows, could be potentially more access to lead shot from both split shot for fishing and from shotguns, and then potential disease events with concentrated numbers of swans. Many, many thanks to our funding partners, Ricketts Conservation Foundation, USGS, Sharon and Todd there, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Andrew Kristoff, and Mark Hogan. Tom from Seed Skiddy, Tom Kerner, he's the manager down there, and he shared all these photos with me. They're all photos he took down in Seed Skiddy, Wyoming Game and Fish. Thanks very much.